Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat with you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you." Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, the area was inhabited by Canaanites. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I will give this land to your descendants." And Abram built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord who had appeared to him. Now Abram and his family went away to Egypt for some time, but they returned to the land of Canaan. The Lord said to Abram, "Look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I am giving all this land as far as you can see to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that like the dust of the earth they cannot be counted. Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you." God told Abram to do something, to leave his home and to go to a place that he did not know. He had to trust God when God told him to do something. God made promises to Abram. He promised Abram descendants, a land for his descendants, and that all the world would be blessed through him. Abram had to trust that God would fulfill his promise. We had motions for land and descendants and for blessing. And those are important ideas for us to remember. It's interesting. God had separated out land for Adam and Eve in the creation story. He made that place for them, and he told them to govern it. Remember, like we took care of little baby chicks? In the story of Noah's family, God had restored dry land so that they would have a place to live, and they really needed one. Then God told them that he had placed the rest of creation in their power, which was a lot like govern. They were supposed to govern too. God told Abram and his family that they would have a place put into their care as well. In next week's story, we'll hear about how God told Abram to represent him, and it's a lot like the story of Adam and Eve and Noah's family, where they were told to be his image and represent him in the world. They were all supposed to govern over the place where God had placed them and had the place that God had placed in their care in ways that showed the world what God is like. But that is for next week. Throughout the story of Abraham's descendants, especially the people called Israel, the land, the place that God promised to put into their care, is very important. As the story of the Bible goes on, we will see if God keeps his promise to give the land to Abraham's descendants. In the creation story and in the story of Noah's family, God told them to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and to govern it. And God told Abram that he would have many descendants. And those are actually pretty related ideas. He told Abram as well that all the earth would be blessed through him. Now, when I was a kid, we sang a kind of silly song, and we always had to march during it, I think because Abram had to walk through the land so much. It went like this. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. It was a silly song, but it said something really interesting. It said that the people who follow God today are like children of Abraham. Now, I don't think that Abraham is my great, a whole lot of more greats, great-grandfather. But in a sense, all the people who trust God like Abram trusted God are like descendants of Abram. He did have a lot of descendants who can say that he is their whole lot of greats, great-grandfather, but he had a lot more descendants who are the people who trust God in the way that he trusted God. In the story of Noah's family, we started to learn about how God's good creation has been corrupted, but God is making creation new again. We might say that the Bible is the story of how God is making all things new again. Abram and his descendants are very important to how God has chosen to do that. In the biblical story, we can see how God blesses the whole world and how God does that through specific people like Abram and his wife Sarah and their children, and through specific people like you and me. So God told Abram to do something that he had to trust God to go and do. Does God tell us to do anything? God tells us to do a lot of things, doesn't he? He tells us to care for those who have less than we do. He tells us to tell our children about how God has been trustworthy. He tells us to be honest and faithful. Do we need to trust God to do what God tells us to do? We do. God made promises to Abram. Abram had to trust that God would fulfill his promises. Does God make promises to us? God does. God promises to always be good. God promises that his love will never stop. God promises that he will be with us. Do we need to trust God that God will fulfill his promises? We do. I'll bet that your parents could tell you some of each of those things, some things that they've had to trust God for that God's told them to do, and also some promises that they've had to trust God for. Maybe you could talk together and your parents could tell you one of each of those things, and then you could think together about something for you, something that God's told you to do that you have to trust him for, and some promise that God's given that you have to trust him for. That could be a good discussion for you this morning. I hope that you can print them at home. I've attached a couple of coloring sheets to your Kids Church at Home email. And I hope that this week, in the place that God has placed you, which is probably your house right now, that you can care for those who are around you.